services page, the next portion of the services page that might appear in the notes is transportation. And transportation notes tend to be pretty brief unless there's some sort of unique circumstance. What unique things about transportation do you guys typically recommend do get included in the notes?
So it's important to discuss in the IEP and document in the notes page the conversation surrounding transportation. We need to document specifically whether or not the student requires transportation and why they require transportation. So just hitting that transportation eligibility issue. So usually if student requires transportation, it has to do with the age and nature of the disability of the student or the availability of the program that the student requires at the student's home school. So if a student requires a program that's not available at their school of residence, then they would require transportation in order to access that program. That conversation and also the parent's response to the offer of transportation, if it's necessary, whether or not the parent, you anticipate the parent will accept that offer of transportation, if there's any conversation surrounding that, should be documented in the notes page.
Awesome. So sometimes students require special supports during transportation. Do you document that only on the IEP or would you put that in the notes as well?
So I think if there's unique transportation needs, like maybe a harness, I think it would be important to document in the notes. I would put the discussion, but on the page, I would list that transportation would include the harness to be used. Because if you put it in the notes, transportation may not find it. And then it's up to each person or case carrier to read each IEP to determine whether or not those special considerations are necessary. So at least if you put it on the IEP page specifically, it's easy for someone to know what the student needs are.
Okay, one more question before we move on from transportation. If the student's program is projected to change partway through the year or it's projected to change at the beginning of the next school year, is there anything different you would do about the notes?
That's an excellent question, Crystal. And that happens a lot when our students transition from preschool to a comprehensive elementary school. And then also when they're transitioning from elementary to middle school, a lot of times our students are returning to their home schools. So at that time, we will document in the notes and also on the transportation box that the student will continue to receive transportation through the end of the school year. But due to the student returning to their home school or their school of residence, the student is no longer eligible for transportation services. And at that time, they will not be receiving transportation.
And I'd like to add also, even if the student is not transitioning, so you're not going to know transportation for each annual year, we are asking case managers to add this bit that's on the orange, in the orange oval there. Transportation will be offered within the district boundaries as long as he or she resides within the district boundaries, is enrolled in MVUSD, and the program is not offered at his or her school of residence. You would embed that into the notes if the only reason that the student is receiving transportation is because the program is not available at the resident school site. And what that does is that kind of sets the parent up. So if you're a second grade case manager or third grade case manager, that parent may think that transportation will always be offered. So that lets them know the reason that they're receiving transportation, and at some point it may not be offered as a service.
So notes on ESY tend to be brief as well as we continue down the services page and we're talking about what the notes on services might look like. What things about ESY eligibility would you include in the notes as we're reflecting on a student having regression or difficulty with recoupment or not having those concerns?
On the notes page, we would document that the team did discuss extended school year and determined that based on current data that the student either they do require or they do not require ESY.
Awesome. Thanks, Audrey. Now, something I do tend to see from time to time when we're looking at ESY and transportation is when a parent does not want those things. Where would we document that a parent does not want transportation or does not want ESY, although it's recommended by the team?
That's a good question, Crystal. Sometimes we do offer services, or the student is eligible for services, and so they're part of their offer of FAPE, but the parent would not does not want ESY, or they do not want transportation, but it's still a part of our offer. So we still um, include that in our offer, but we document that the parent is declining these services at this time. But it still should be documented in the IEP and continue to be offered as a service.
Crystal, I noticed on the slide, there is a bubble that says ESY eligibility worksheet. If the team decides to use that worksheet, I highly recommend that everyone get a peek at it before the meeting and really understand what the questions are asking. Because when you read it talks about milestones, and when you look at where the student is in terms of skill acquisition, it's hard to pull back those words once you say them in the meeting that, oh yes, the student would benefit from an extra 2 weeks or 4 weeks to learn this skill. But again, it's not about them learning a new skill. It's about regression and recoupment. So if the team's going to use the worksheet, review it ahead of time, have a discussion, and then include that in your numbered IEP packet. Include it as a page at the end. And then whoever looks at the IEP in the future will understand how you came to that conclusion.
So next we're looking at special education related services in the notes. And do you write out the exact offer of FAPE in the notes?
That's an excellent question, Crystal. We are required to write a offer of FAPE statement and with the exact offer of FAPE that we're offering to the parent in terms of the services, but not every single detail. So if we're offering specialized academic instruction, transportation, ESY, we would just document those things that we're offering, the services, and then we would add see service page for details. So that would make the person go back and look at the service page for the details for those specific services that are offered for the student.
Awesome. Now, parents are also supposed to be well informed and understand what the district's offer of FAPE is, and sometimes they don't agree. So what are your thoughts on that, guys, when we're documenting parent response to the offer of FAPE?
Crystal, when that occurs, what I try to do is document specifically what the parent disagrees with and why. So if the parent says, I disagree with the offer of FAPE, I would try to go item by item through the services or what we're offering and specifically hone it down, try to narrow it down. So should there be a continuation IEP, we know exactly what we have to address at that point in time.
Awesome. And do you guys document whether or not parent is in agreement with the offer of FAPE in the notes?
I think that's really important. I also document if the parent understands the offer of FAPE, if they have any questions, and then I also ask them, are they in agreement with the services that's being offered to for the student?